Thank you, sir. My question is to the Premier. Can the Premier guarantee that all services participating in his government's 3-year-old preschool program from 2026 and beyond will have all the relevant qualified staff required and will not need to seek any waivers or exemptions from the Education Standards Board?
The Minister for Education.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Morialta for his question and his interest in our rollout of 3-year-old preschool. As members of this place I'm sure will know, and as the Premier and I have spoken about at great length again this week, because we've just announced $715 million over the next 5 years to actually have what we need to commence the rollout of 3-year-old preschool in 2026, that the model that was recommended by the Royal Commissioner, Julia Gillard, was a mixed model which will have some of the 3-year-old preschool provided in government settings and some provided in long daycare settings. We, of course, therefore are very keen for those long daycare providers to partner with us. We have Kim Little, who is the inaugural Chief Executive Officer of the Office for Early Childhood Development, who is in charge of putting together that rollout. Kim will be making sure that as we seek to partner with those long daycare providers who express an interest, and we anticipate that many will, that there will be some very stringent requirements which are put in place to make sure that they have or meet the requirements that we are setting, to make sure that what they provide by way of 3-year-old preschool is teacher-led, play-based learning, which is at the heart of what good preschool is, and to make sure the staff they have the qualifications that are needed. So that was the recommendation by the Royal Commissioner, Julia Gillard, around how we could fast-track our rollout, and the rollout that we are moving towards here in South Australia is a quick one. It will be much faster than the rollout across the border in Victoria, and one of the reasons that we'll be able to do that, Mr Speaker, is because the mixed model lets us do that by leveraging the capacity of the long daycare sector, the staff it has and the facilities it has, but it will not be a case of just simply putting up your hand and therefore being able to be a part of it. There will be a number of things that will be put in place around the qualifications of staff, around the infrastructure, to make sure that there is consistency in terms of what is provided, regardless of whether you're getting that dose of 3-year-old preschool, regardless, Mr Speaker, of whether it is 15 hours or at some of our intensive hubs 30 hours, to make sure there is consistency of what is provided between the government and the long daycare providers, who we know are keen and will welcome to come on board if they can meet the requirements that we put in place.
Supplementary from the Deputy Leader.
Given the Minister's answer, can he guarantee that none of the centres providing what is described as a 3-year-old preschool program, when the government is commencing this program, will be operating with waivers or exemptions from the Education Standards Board for teachers in the classroom?
The Minister for Education.
Well, thank you, Speaker. I think I did actually just answer that question. We have very precise workforce targets which have been set down by Julia Gillard in the Royal Commission that she handed down last year, and they have been updated, and I think from memory currently sit at about 880 additional early childhood workers, 800 additional early childhood teachers, and there's some things that we are already doing and announcing to put in place changes to the qualifications so that we can have a birth to 5 3-year early childhood teaching qualification, and also 120 extra staff as well. So we know what the targets are, and those targets will enable us to offer 3-year-old preschool between starting in 2026 and full rollout by 2032, with consistency right across it. And of course, our aim is not to have waivers. That is every state's ambition. It is not an ideal situation to have waivers of the required qualifications or ratios. As I said, a number of things we are doing to be able to build that workforce. One is changing and creating the new Birth to 5 early childhood teaching course, which will be an important thing. Fee-free TAFE courses, which we have already rolled out. Technical colleges that will have that as a stream. There's a $56 million workforce fund, which has already been announced, which will play a really important role in building that workforce as well. There are some really exciting announcements which have been made at a federal level as well, including around pay for people in the early childhood sector, which will help to make, I hope, it a career of choice and reward those currently in it so we can retain them as well. So our ambition absolutely is to not to have those waivers. Our ambition now is not to have waivers, Mr Speaker, but it is, of course, a challenging environment at the moment where, particularly in a state like South Australia, where we are practically at full employment, the work of a teacher, whether it's a primary teacher, sir, or a secondary teacher, as well as the work of those who work in a long daycare setting or a preschool, is challenging work, and many would observe that it has become more challenging over the years, and we are in a jobs and labour market, I think the Treasurer said today, where there are more advertised job vacancies than there have ever been. So there is a lot of choice out there for people. So there are things that we need to do in place as a government to make sure that we can retain the existing workforce and attract new people in there, so we can meet the targets that were put in place by Julia Gillard of that 880, 800 and 120 extra staff. So when we commence that rollout in 2026 and have full rollout by 2032, we have all the staff we need in place and we will not need waivers. That is absolutely our ambition.
The Deputy Leader.
So my question is to the Premier. Can the Premier advise how many early childhood teachers will enter the system by 2032 as a result of the introduction of the 3-year 0 to 5 teaching degree?
The Minister for Education.
Could I ask the Deputy Leader to repeat that question, if you may?
Would you mind repeating the question?
I'm happy to, sir. I was asking whether the Premier or the Minister can advise how many early childhood teachers will enter the system by 2032 as a result of the introduction of the 3-year teaching degree for 0 to 5.
The Minister for Education.
Thank you, Speaker. I'll take that on notice. I mean, it will depend, of course, largely on uptake as well, and that will depend on how many people we can encourage to take up the course, and there's a lot of work we're going to have to do that. But what we have brought in place, or are in the process of bringing in place, is instead of the 4-year degree that was birth to 8, which from memory I think only had about a 25% focus on the birth to 5 years or birth to 4 years, we are instead doing a birth to 5 degree, which will take 3 years, so a shorter degree, which of course will help us in terms of getting people through that course, but of course it will have a much bigger focus on those early years, which I think is really important, because one of the main reasons that we have announced the rollout of 3-year-old preschool is because we know that if we are to get those levels of developmental vulnerability down, and we are at 23.8% here in South Australia, which is above the national average, if we had to get it down to 15% by 2042, as was set out by the Royal Commissioner, 3-year-old preschool will play a very important role in doing that. But our ability to make sure that we can build the workforce, and in terms of the specific question asked by the member for Morialta, how many we actually have on board by 2032 will in no small way depend on how successful we are in encouraging other people to take it up as a profession. And as I said in my answer to the last question from the member for Morialta, it is a difficult environment in which to do that at the moment, where more so than I think ever before, just about in our state's history, there are job opportunities in a lot of areas, and a lot of that work is as well paid, and a lot of it is better paid than it might be in the early years sector, and probably doesn't come with some of the complexities and heartaches that that job does. But we know that people who work in the early years are incredibly committed people. They don't do it for money, they do it because they know they have an incredible ability in that job to influence the lives of young people. We know that 90% of the brain development of a young person is done by the age of 5. And if we don't get that right, it contributes significantly to those levels of developmental vulnerability, whether it be cognitive or language or social or emotional or physical. And it means when they sit down in their reception class on the first day, they are already starting behind. And we are playing catch-up, essentially, for the rest of that child's time in their primary and secondary schooling. That's why we're doing it. Part of the effectiveness of 3-year-old preschool is that it is designed to be teacher-led, play-based learning, and that comes back to the member for Morialta's question around teachers, and of course attracting those early childhood teachers is a key thing. How many exactly we have by 2032 will be guided by how successful we are in putting things in place to encourage people to take it up, but the changes we have already made around changing from a 4-year degree to a 3-year degree will help that, and there will be more initiatives I know that Kim Little and her team are planning on announcing too around how we can attract that workforce and how we can retain it.
Leader, can you just wait 1 second? I'd just like to acknowledge the presence in the gallery today of Her Excellency Zin Ma Aung, the Foreign Minister to the National Unity Government of Myanmar. We welcome you to South Australia's Parliament, and we hope you enjoy Australia's quietest and calmest question time. Everyone's being very, very well behaved today, and Her Excellency is the guest of the Minister for Multicultural Affairs. The Deputy Leader.
All of the journalists are in the budget lockup, so that may affect things a little bit. Sir, thank you. My question is to the Premier or the Minister, if they prefer. What specific measures and practical actions will be delivered by the government's $96 million funding announcement to grow the early childhood workforce? And with your leave and that of the House, sir, I'll explain.
Leave is sought. Is leave granted?
Thank you. The only measure announced in the press release with which the $96 million announcement was contained was extra support for the Education Standards Board to increase the frequencies of assessments and ratings. Earlier in question time, the Minister referred also to the $56 million fund that is in the department. The department's website identifies only that initiatives will support attraction, qualification, pathways, retention and quality, but gives no detail at all about what measures or initiatives will be funded out of this large amount of money.
The Minister for Education.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the member for Morialta for his question, and a fair question it is too. And we will be announcing more things very soon around the specifics of what will come out of that bucket of money that the Deputy Leader just referred to, the $96 million. And there's going to be a lot of things, obviously, that we have to look at. We are, of course, in an environment at the moment where other jurisdictions, Victoria is one that springs to mind, and others as well, have been offering some pretty significant incentives, financial incentives, to attract people across the border. I think, fortunately, we haven't been in a position where we have lost many of those from South Australia, but we will look at whether or not we need to do something like that as well, to make sure that we can not just preserve our own workforce and grow the local workforce, which is what we've been focused on, but also potentially offer incentives for, I think, other early childhood teachers and workers who might want to actually come across to our state, to South Australia, and be part of what is a historic rollout, and in pretty quick time as well. Scholarships, there's been some discussion in this place, Mr Speaker, and certainly nationally over, we are trying to encourage people to potentially change career, or people to take up a new career not long out of high school, in an environment where cost of living is really front of mind for people, and we still have systems in place, including in education and the early years, where the people who have sought to take up a course there have to undertake placements, often for quite considerable periods of time throughout the year. They are unpaid placements as well. In addition to that, we are seeking people to potentially pay their way through their course, whether it's HECS or whatever it might be. Of course, in terms of early childhood workers, the Certificate 3 in Early Childhood Education and Care has been and remains on the fee-free TAFE list, which of course helps with that. But I think we'll need to consider what we do also around potentially looking at scholarships to cover course costs. I don't think it is reasonable for us to expect, Mr Speaker, that someone who might be a more mature age worker, possibly with a family, with a mortgage, and we are asking them to go and get the qualifications they need to move career and work in an early childhood setting on 3-year-old preschool, but potentially take a pay cut, potentially do unpaid placements, and potentially find the money to pay for a course up front or pay the HECS debt later on. So out of that $96 million fund, and as I said, we'll be making more specific announcements very soon around where that goes, but there'll be things like that that I think we have to consider to try to offer incentives for staff to stay, potentially offer incentives for those from outside South Australia who might like to come to our state and be a part of it, but also offer what essentially a cost of living relief in some ways to bridge that gap in terms of what they need to spend to get the qualification they need to change a career, and trying to assist those too who are trying to meet mortgage payments, all the usual family expenses, while being asked to potentially go out and do unpaid placements as well. So it won't be long before I'm able to give this place and the member for Morialta more specifics. But the instructions that Kim little the Chief Executive has been given by Cabinet was to make sure that a broad range of potential initiatives are considered to do whatever we can to make sure that we keep our existing workforce and build it, and that we meet those targets put in place by Julia Gillard in her report